Hello. Mark, I'm heading to a housewarming party for one of my clients, she said casually, brushing a strand of her auburn hair from her face. She was dressed to impress. Tight black dress, heels that clicked sharply on the tile, and her usual effortless charm. It wasn't unusual for her to socialize with clients, so I barely looked up. All right, I replied, my eyes glued to the monitor. I won't be late. 10 at the latest. Yeah, sure. She lingered for a moment, as if expecting more from me, then sighed softly. Okay, don't work too hard, she said with a quick smile before heading out the door. The sound of her heels receded down the hall, followed by the click of the front door closing. Hours passed. The house was silent except for the hum of my computer and the faint scratching of my pen as I jotted down notes. Time had slipped away unnoticed until a loud ping echoed from the kitchen counter. It was her phone. I stood, stretching the stiffness from my back, and walked toward the kitchen. The phone buzzed again, its screen lighting up with a message. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something stopped me. Lauren rarely left her phone behind. She was practically attached to it, constantly checking emails or scrolling through Instagram for her real estate business. But tonight, it sat on the counter, buzzing incessantly. I glanced at the screen. The preview displayed, Ryan, last night was amazing. My hand hovered above the phone. A part of me told me to leave it alone, to trust her, to let it go. But then another message popped up. Ryan, same time tomorrow? The words burned into my mind. My stomach twisted as I stared at the glowing screen. The phone now a ticking bomb in the center of the kitchen. I pressed the power button to turn off the display, trying to convince myself not to jump to conclusions. But I couldn't stop. I grabbed the phone. Swiping it open was disturbingly easy. I knew her passcode. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through the conversation. The texts were clear, intimate, and damning. Ryan, you looked incredible in that red dress. Wish I could have stayed longer. Lauren, me too. Next time, no rushing. Winking face Ryan, deal. Can't wait to see you again. My chest tightened. Each message was another nail in the coffin of my marriage. My mind raced as I pieced together what this meant. Who the hell was Ryan? How long had this been going on? And where was she right now if not at some housewarming party? The last text gave me a clue. Ryan had mentioned the gym, specifically a boutique place Lauren had raved about months ago, something about personal training sessions and yoga classes. I remember the name, Peak Fitness. I placed the phone back on the counter, my jaw tight. A confrontation wasn't the right move. Not yet. I needed answers, evidence, and a chance to see the truth for myself. Pulling my jacket off the back of a chair, I grabbed my keys and stepped out into the crisp night air. If this Ryan thought he could snake his way into my life, he was about to get a rude awakening. The gym wasn't far, and the drive was short. The neon glow of its sign illuminated the lot, and I parked in the shadows, scanning for a car. There it was, parked neatly near the back, a spot she often joked was safest from door dings. I didn't see her immediately, but the car's presence told me enough. I clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles white as I debated what to do next. Bust in? Wait for her to emerge? My heart raced as I tried to steel myself. The glowing sign for Edge Fitness buzzed faintly in the distance as I pulled into the dimly lit parking lot. The place wasn't particularly crowded for this time of night, but my eyes were laser-focused on one thing, her car. There it was, parked deliberately in a shadowed corner of the lot. A habit of hers, always conscious about keeping her car away from traffic. I drove past slowly, noting another vehicle parked 2 spots away, a sleek black Mustang, polished to a mirror finish. It didn't seem random. I parked my car near the entrance, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment in the silence, the stillness broken only by the faint rhythm of my heartbeat in my ears. I knew I couldn't just storm in there. Grabbing my phone, I stepped out into the cool night air and walked toward her car, my footsteps muffled by the asphalt. I crouched near the driver's side window, peering inside. Nothing out of place, gym bag, water bottle, the usual. But as I stood, something glimmered on the dashboard. It was a folded receipt. I glanced around the parking lot, ensuring no one was watching, before carefully opening the door. Lauren never locked her car. She trusted people too much. I reached for the paper, unfolding it under the dim glow of a nearby street lamp. It wasn't a receipt for gym membership fees or yoga classes. No, it was for Bella Vino, a high-end Italian restaurant downtown. The timestamp? Last night. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, and a dessert, well over $150. The receipt might as well have been a confession. I pulled out my phone and snapped a clear photo of the receipt, my anger simmering just below the surface. This wasn't a housewarming party. This wasn't about her clients or her work. She had been here with him, laughing, sipping wine, sharing dessert. The sound of voices startled me. A man and a woman emerged from the side entrance of the gym. I stepped back, ducking behind another car as they approached. "Thanks for staying late," the man said. "Same time next week?" I couldn't make out the woman's reply, but their laughter cut through the air like nails. As they climbed into their cars and drove off, I caught my breath and straightened. The coast was clear again. I made my way into the gym. The air was thick with the smell of rubber mats and cleaning solution. Bright fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting off the mirrored walls. At the reception desk, a young guy with a clipboard glanced up at me. "Hey, welcome to Edge Fitness. Can I help you with something?" "Actually, yeah," I said, pulling out my phone and bringing up a photo of Lauren. "Have you seen her here tonight?" He tilted his head, studying the image for a moment before nodding. "Oh yeah, she's a regular. Comes in a couple of times a week. I think she was here earlier." "Was she alone?" I asked, keeping my tone casual despite the storm brewing inside me. The guy smirked slightly, leaning against the desk. "Not exactly. She's usually with this guy. Dark hair, tall, kind of looks like a model or something. They left together a little while ago." My fists clenched involuntarily, and I forced myself to relax. "You wouldn't happen to know his name, would you?" "Nah, sorry. I just see them around. They usually head out through the side exit. Less crowded, you know?" I nodded, muttering a quick thanks before heading back outside. The Mustang was still there, gleaming under the street lamp. My anger was now a steady pulse, and I couldn't stop myself. Pulling out my phone again, I snapped pictures of both cars, the license plates, the positions in the lot, every detail I could think of. If this had been a spiral, I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. As I walked back to my car, the weight of what I had discovered settled heavily on my shoulders. Lauren had lied to my face. She had looked me in the eye, promised to be home by 10, and was now wrapped up in some secret life with someone else. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly. The receipt sat on the passenger seat, damning and undeniable. The GPS guided me downtown, each turn bringing me closer to an address that glowed on the receipt like a beacon. Bella Vino was in a trendy part of Austin, nestled among boutique shops and dimly lit restaurants. But as I approached, my mind drifted to something Lauren had once mentioned offhandedly, almost smugly. "There's this rooftop lounge above Bella Vino. Most people don't even know it's there. It's exclusive, intimate, perfect for unwinding after a long day." She had said it while flipping through her phone one evening, her tone tinged with casual pride. I hadn't given it much thought at the time, but now the memory hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just dinner. This was her sanctuary. I parked in a nearby lot and walked briskly toward the restaurant. From the street, Bella Vino's dimly lit windows showcased couples dining over candlelight, the kind of place where a private booth cost extra. But my destination wasn't inside. To the right of the entrance was a narrow staircase, roped off with a small sign. "Lounge access. Members only." A young woman sat at a podium, her bored expression barely lifting as I approached. "Sir, are you a member?" she asked, her voice dripping with indifference. "I'm meeting someone upstairs," I replied tersely. She gave me a once-over, but didn't argue, unhooking the rope. "Third floor," she said, motioning toward the staircase. Each step felt heavier than the last as I ascended. At the top, the lounge sprawled out before me, glowing with soft string lights and dotted with low tables surrounded by plush chairs. A well-stocked bar occupied one side, while the other opened to a breathtaking view of the city skyline. And there she was. Lauren sat at a corner table, laughing, her head tilted slightly as she leaned toward him. Ryan. He was every bit the smirking, too perfect stereotype the gym attendant described. Dark hair slicked back, tailored blazer, and the kind of self-assured demeanor that made my blood boil. His hand rested casually on her thigh, as if it belonged there. I didn't think. My legs carried me forward before my mind could catch up. "Lauren," I barked, my voice cutting through the soft hum of conversation. Heads turned, and I barely registered them. She froze, her laughter dying mid-sound as she turned to face me. Her eyes widened, a flicker of shock flashing across her face before she quickly masked it with something colder, annoyance. "Mark," she said, her tone sharp, as if I were the one out of place. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. Ryan leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face. He didn't move his hand. If anything, he seemed to tighten his grip, as though staking his claim. "Mark, calm down," Lauren said, her voice dripping with exasperation. "You're making a scene. Don't you dare tell me to calm down." I snapped, pointing a finger at her. "You lied to me. A client's housewarming party? Really? This is what you're doing instead." Lauren crossed her arms, her smirk returning. "I don't owe you an explanation." Ryan chuckled, a low, infuriating sound. "Man, maybe you should take a seat before you embarrass yourself anymore." I turned my glare on him. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Someone who knows how to make her happy," Ryan replied smoothly, his grin widening. "Something you clearly can't handle." That was it. My fist connected with his jaw before I even realized I'd swung. The impact sent him sprawling backward, his chair toppling over as he crashed into a nearby table, spilling drinks and sending glass shattering across the floor. Gasps erupted around the room as patrons scrambled to get out of the way. Lauren shot to her feet, her eyes blazing. "Mark, what the hell is wrong with you?" But I wasn't listening. Ryan staggered to his feet, rubbing his jaw, and lunged at me. His fist grazed my shoulder as I dodged, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "You think you could just waltz into my life and take what's mine?" I growled through clenched teeth. "Man, she's not yours," Ryan spat back, his lip curling. "She's happier with me. Get over it." The words sent a fresh surge of rage coursing through me, and I drove my fist into his stomach, doubling him over. "Stop it!" Lauren screamed, grabbing my arm and trying to pull me away. "You're acting like a lunatic." "Acting like a lunatic?" I shot back, shaking her off. "You've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to me, and I'm the lunatic?" By then, security had arrived. Two burly men in black polo shirts who grabbed me by the arms, pulling me away from Ryan. He leaned against the wall, coughing, but still managed to smirk at me. "Real classy, man," he said, wiping blood from the corner of his mouth. "Guess I know why she wanted something better." I lunged again, but the guards held me back, dragging me toward the stairs. Lauren stood there, her arms crossed and her face set in an infuriating mix of anger and indifference. "Don't bother coming home tonight." I snapped at her as the guards hauled me away. "You've made it clear where you'd rather be." I didn't wait for a reply. The stairs blurred as I was escorted down and shoved out into the cool night air. My chest heaved as I stood on the sidewalk, fists clenched, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. The drive home felt like I was caught in some surreal haze. The city lights blurred together, and the buzz of adrenaline from the fight at the lounge was slowly being replaced by a seething, icy anger. My knuckles were raw from the punch, but I hardly noticed. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house looked as it always did, dark, quiet, and unsuspecting. But everything had changed. The woman I had shared this home with for years had turned it into the backdrop for her deceit. I stepped inside, the soft click of the door closing behind me feeling like the signal of a match being struck. I tossed my keys onto the counter and paced the kitchen, my mind a whirlwind of questions, accusations, and fragments of the night's chaos. Her car wasn't in the driveway yet, and I knew she'd be home eventually. I didn't sit. I couldn't. Instead, I grabbed the receipt from Bella Vino that I had photographed earlier and set it down on the counter like evidence in a courtroom. Her phone was still there, taunting me from where she had left it. I picked it up again, scrolling through the messages with Ryan one more time, as if to solidify my case. The hours crawled by, and then finally, I heard the faint crunch of gravel under tires. Her headlights swept across the living room, and seconds later, the front door opened. Lauren stepped in, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She froze when she saw me standing in the kitchen, her expression flickering with something between annoyance and mild surprise. "You're still up?" she asked, dropping her purse onto the console table. I held her gaze, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. "We need to talk." She sighed dramatically, slipping out of her shoes and heading toward the fridge. "Can it wait until morning? I'm exhausted." "Cut the crap, Lauren," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "I know." She stopped mid-step, her hand hovering over the refrigerator door. Slowly, she turned to face me, her expression hardening. "You know what?" I picked up the receipt from the counter and held it up. "Bella vino. Last night. Ring a bell?" Her eyes flicked to the paper, and for a brief second, there was a crack in her composure, a flash of panic before she quickly masked it with indifference. "You went through my things?" she said, her voice laced with accusation. I slammed the receipt onto the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen. "Don't even try to deflect. I saw you, Lauren, at the lounge. With him." She crossed her arms, her expression icy. "You mean Ryan? He's a friend, Mark. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Friends don't send texts like this," I said, holding up her phone, the damning messages glowing on the screen. "Friends don't have dinner dates at Bella Vino and laugh while their friend has his hand on their thigh." Her mouth opened and closed for a moment, as if searching for the right words, but none came. She finally rolled her eyes and muttered, "You're acting like a lunatic." "Do not gaslight me," I barked, slamming the phone down next to the receipt. "How long has this been going on? Mark, how long?" I demanded, my voice rising. She hesitated, then exhaled sharply, her tone shifting to one of icy resignation. "Fine. Months. Happy now?" It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Even though I had suspected it, hearing her say it so casually, so coldly, hit me like a freight train. "Months," I repeated, my voice hollow. "How could you?" "Oh, spare me the theatrics," she snapped, cutting me off. "You're not exactly innocent in this, Mark. You've been checked out of this marriage for ages. Always working, always glued to that damn laptop. I needed something more." "Something more?" I shouted, the rage bubbling up again. "So, your solution is to crawl into bed with someone else? To lie to my face? To throw away everything we've built for what? A thrill?" "You don't get it," she said, her voice sharpening. "You stopped seeing me, Mark. You stopped trying. Do you even remember the last time we went out? The last time you made me feel like I mattered?" Her words were like daggers, but I wasn't about to let her rewrite history. "Don't you dare pin this on me," I said, my voice low and seething. "I've worked my ass off to provide for us, to give you everything you've ever wanted. And this is how you repay me." Lauren smirked, a cruel edge to her expression. "Oh, please. Don't act like you're some saint. You work, you come home, and you zone out. You're predictable, Mark. Boring." The word hit me like a slap. "Boring," I repeated, my fists clenching at my sides. "You destroy our marriage, humiliate me, and I'm the problem because I'm boring?" She shrugged, her indifference infuriating. "It's not like I planned this, all right? It just happened." "Don't give me that," I snapped, my voice trembling with anger. "You knew exactly what you were doing. Every text, every dinner, every lie, you chose this." "And maybe I did," she shot back, her tone defiant. "But if you had been paying attention, maybe you would have seen it coming." The room fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, and realized she wasn't going to apologize. She wasn't going to admit fault. "You're unbelievable," I said finally, my voice hollow. "But you know what? You're right. I didn't see it coming. And that's on me." Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there. The events of the past night replayed in my mind like a relentless reel I couldn't pause. Lauren's words, her cold admission, her attempt to pin her betrayal on me, fueled my anger and hardened my resolve. By the time the morning light seeped through the blinds, I knew I couldn't face this alone. My parents, David and Eleanor, lived less than an hour away in a quiet suburb. They were the kind of people who believed in fighting for marriage, but I knew my mother especially wouldn't tolerate what Lauren had done. As I pulled into their driveway, my chest tightened. This wasn't just about seeking advice. It was about laying everything bare. Eleanor opened the door before I even knocked, her face etched with concern. "Mark, what's wrong? You look like you haven't slept. I need to talk to both of you," I said simply, stepping inside. David appeared from the living room, newspaper in hand, his brow furrowing as he looked me over. "What's going on, son?" I sat down at the kitchen table, the weight of the past few days pressing down on me as I began to explain. I told them everything, the text, the receipt, the confrontation at the lounge. When I got to the part about Lauren admitting the affair had been going on for months, Eleanor's hand shot to her mouth. That ungrateful," she began, her voice shaking with indignation. David placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression grim. "Let him finish," I continued, sparing no detail about Lauren's attempt to justify her actions by calling me boring and accusing me of emotional neglect. When I finally finished, the room fell silent. Eleanor was the first to speak. "She blames you," she said incredulously, her voice rising. "After everything you've done for her? The long hours, the sacrifices. I thought I was building something for us," I said, my voice hollow. David leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "Mark, you've got to protect yourself now. If she's been lying this long, there's no telling what else she's hiding." "I already started looking into that," I said. "There's something else. I checked her joint account this morning. She's been pulling money, thousands, out for months. Gifts, trips. I think they've been using our money for their dates." Eleanor's face turned red. "That's theft. You need to file for divorce immediately. Protect what's yours before she drains you dry." "I plan to," I said, my jaw tightening. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table. Lauren's name flashed on the screen, but I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at it for a moment before turning it off. "Let me guess," Eleanor said bitterly. "She's trying to play nice now that she knows you're not just rolling over." Before I could respond, David spoke. "Mark, this needs to be handled carefully. We'll support you, but it's going to get messy. What about her parents? Do they know?" I hadn't thought about Steve and Carol yet, but I knew they'd defend Lauren no matter what. They'd always seen me as some workaholic who didn't deserve their precious daughter. "Not yet," I said, "but they will soon." That afternoon, a family meeting was arranged at my house. Lauren's parents arrived first, her father Steve looking as stiff and disapproving as ever, while Carol carried an air of smugness that set my teeth on edge. Lauren arrived last, her expression carefully neutral. The tension in the room was palpable as we all sat down. Eleanor wasted no time, her voice cutting through the silence. "Mark has told us everything." Steve raised an eyebrow. "Everything? I doubt that." "Really?" Eleanor shot back. "Did he mention the part where your daughter has been sneaking around with another man for months? Or the part where she's been stealing from their joint account to fund her little escapades?" Carol gasped. "That's enough." Lauren was lonely and neglected. Mark buried himself in his work and left her to fend for herself emotionally. "That's no excuse for cheating," Eleanor said, her voice sharp as steel. Steve leaned forward, his tone calm but condescending. "Mark, I think we all need to acknowledge your role in this. Lauren didn't wake up one day and decide to cheat. She was driven to it by the lack of attention at home." I slammed my hand on the table. "Don't you dare put this on me. You trusted her. I supported her. I worked my ass off to give her everything she wanted, and this is how she repays me." Lauren, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "This isn't helping anyone. Let's just admit we both made mistakes and figure out how to move forward." "Move forward," I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You think we're just going to brush this under the rug and pretend it didn't happen?" She crossed her arms. "Mark, I'm trying to be reasonable here. We both know this marriage hasn't been working for a long time." Eleanor stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "Unbelievable. Lauren, you're sitting here acting like the victim when you're the one who destroyed this marriage." Steve rose to his feet, glaring at her. "That's enough. If you're just here to berate Lauren, then this conversation is over." David intervened, his voice steady but firm. Let's not lose sight of the facts. Lauren cheated. She lied. And now, she's trying to manipulate the narrative to make herself look like the victim. The shouting escalated from there, accusations flying back and forth until I couldn't take it anymore. I stood abruptly, silencing the room. This isn't a debate, I said coldly. I'm filing for divorce. I've already started preparing the paperwork. Lauren's face hardened. Fine. Do what you have to do. I will, I said, locking eyes with her. And I'll make sure every penny you took from me is accounted for. By the time everyone left, the house felt both quieter and heavier. I sat at the table, staring at the stack of notes I had started compiling for the divorce. Lauren thought she could manipulate her way out of this, but she had underestimated me. With the divorce set in motion, Lauren's manipulations and her family's excuses faded to the background. My focus shifted, honing in on the man who had inserted himself into my life, Ryan. If Lauren wanted to spin this into a tale of emotional neglect, fine. But Ryan? He wasn't just a symptom of her dissatisfaction. He was a leech feeding off my life and resources. That had to stop. I spent the next few days digging into him like a surgeon peeling back layers. It wasn't hard to find him. People like Ryan didn't exactly hide. Social media painted the perfect picture. Gym selfies, motivational quotes, and endless photos with wealthy clients grinning beside him. Ryan's peak performance, his boutique fitness business, was tagged in most of them, boasting captions about elite training for elite people. His followers ate it up, but I wasn't convinced. People who polished their public image this hard usually had something to hide. I started small, combing through reviews of his gym. The first few were glowing. Effusive praise from clients who claimed he transformed their lives. But buried deeper were the cracks. Complaints about excessive fees, high-pressure tactics to buy overpriced packages, and equipment that mysteriously broke down despite premium pricing. That was my first lead. The breakthrough came when I reached out to former clients and employees. A few polite inquiries on social media led me to Derek, who claimed he had worked for Ryan years ago as a junior trainer. We met at a coffee shop downtown, Derek's bitterness practically radiating from him as he recounted his time at peak performance. Ryan's all flash and no substance, Derek said, stirring his coffee aggressively. When I started, I thought he was legit, you know? Seemed like he had this big vision. But it didn't take long to see the cracks. What kind of cracks? I asked, leaning forward. Derek smirked. Shady stuff. He'd push clients to pay up front for these massive packages, 10, 20 grand. Then half the time he wouldn't deliver. If they complained, he'd gaslight them or just cut them loose. And nobody called him out on it? Oh, people tried, Derek said. But Ryan's smart. He keeps everything in the gray area. Enough to piss people off, but not enough for them to take legal action. And de certification? Half of them are fake. I raised an eyebrow. Fake? Yeah, Derek said, pulling out his phone. He showed me a photo of an old certificate Ryan used to display in the gym, supposedly from a prestigious sports academy. I looked it up once. Doesn't exist. He probably bought it online. This was gold. Later that evening, I kept digging, leveraging every tool I could. Public records revealed more about Ryan's financial situation. His flashy lifestyle, designer clothes, high-end gym equipment, that sleek black Mustang was a house of cards. He was drowning in debt, with multiple maxed-out credit cards and unpaid loans. The Mustang itself was on borrowed time, with repossession notices filed against it just last month. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Ryan was living beyond his means, probably relying on his wealthy clients, and people like Lauren, to fund his facade. By now, the anger that had driven me was transforming into something sharper, more calculated. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about ensuring Ryan couldn't pull the same stunts with someone else. My next move was to compile everything I had found into a neat little package. The gym complaints, Derek's testimony, the forged certifications, the debt. It all painted a damning picture. But it wasn't enough to have the information. I needed to use it. That night, as I stared at the files on my laptop, a plan began to form. Ryan had built his empire on lies, charm, and manipulation. I was going to knock it all down. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm I had been watching on the horizon, knowing it would hit hard, but brings some much-needed clarity. The courthouse was sterile and imposing, its stone columns looming over me as I walked through the glass doors. My lawyer, Jeff, met me in the lobby, his briefcase in one hand and an air of confidence in the other. "We've got this," Jeff said as we climbed the stairs to the courtroom. "The evidence is solid, and the judge isn't going to look kindly on her actions." I nodded but didn't reply. Words felt unnecessary now. Inside, Lauren was already seated at the table on the other side of the room, flanked by her lawyer. She looked composed, her hair styled perfectly, and she wore a fitted blazer that screamed professional sophistication. It was a calculated move, no doubt meant to counter the image of her betrayal. Her parents sat in the gallery behind her, with Steve looking stoic and Carol offering her daughter a reassuring smile. On my side, my parents had taken their places, Eleanor shooting daggers at Lauren with her eyes while David maintained his usual measured demeanor. The bailiff called the court to order, and the proceedings began. Jeff started strong, laying out the case with precision. He detailed Lauren's infidelity, backing it with the text messages, photos of the receipt, and the joint account withdrawals. The exhibits were displayed one by one, each a damning reminder of her deception. "Your Honor," Jeff said, his voice steady, "this case is not about placing blame for a failed marriage. It is about holding one party accountable for reckless financial behavior and betrayal that directly harmed my client." Lauren's lawyer, a sharp-looking man named Dan, was quick to counter. "Your Honor, we contend that both parties share responsibility for the breakdown of this marriage." Mrs. Lauren sought companionship because she felt neglected and undervalued. My client acted out of emotional desperation, not malice. Jeff didn't miss a beat. Emotional desperation doesn't justify siphoning thousands of dollars from their shared account for secret trips and gifts for her affair partner. It doesn't excuse blatant dishonesty. Lauren's composure faltered slightly, her lips tightening as she exchanged a glance with Dan. The turning point came when Jeff introduced the financial records. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and an air of no-nonsense authority, leaned forward as Jeff presented the documents. "Your Honor," Jeff said, gesturing to the highlighted withdrawals, "these transactions clearly show funds were used to support an extramarital affair. This includes expensive dinners, luxury hotel stays, and personal gifts for the affair partner. These actions have not only betrayed my client's trust, but have left him financially burdened." Dan attempted to redirect the focus back to my work habits, arguing that I had prioritized my career over my marriage, but the judge seemed unimpressed. "Mr. Dan," she said, cutting him off mid-sentence, "while work-life balance is a common marital issue, it does not excuse or mitigate the blatant misuse of marital assets for an affair. Please stick to the financial aspects of the case." As the day wore on, Lauren's parents attempted to shift the narrative. Steve spoke on Lauren's behalf, claiming she was a dedicated wife who had been pushed to her limits by Mark's emotional unavailability. Carol chimed in, painting Lauren as a victim who had been forced to seek validation elsewhere. Eleanor couldn't contain herself any longer. "Forced?" she said loudly from her seat, drawing a sharp look from the judge. "No one forced Lauren to cheat. She made that choice. Let's not pretend she's some martyr." The judge banged her gavel. "Order in the court. Mrs. Eleanor, if you cannot remain silent, I will have you removed." Eleanor sat back, muttering under her breath, but her point had been made. The judge's decision came after a short recess. The courtroom fell silent as she began reading her verdict. "Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Mrs. Lauren's actions have been both deceitful and financially reckless. The plaintiff has demonstrated significant harm as a result of these actions, and as such, this court finds in favor of Mr. Mark. The division of assets will reflect this ruling." She continued, outlining the terms. "I would retain the house and a significant portion of our shared assets. Lauren would leave with her car and her personal belongings, but no claim to further marital property." Lauren's jaw tightened, her mask of composure slipping for the first time. After the gavel fell, I stood, the weight of the battle lifting slightly. Lauren's eyes locked on mine as I turned to leave. "You got what you wanted," she said coldly, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "No," I replied, pausing just long enough to meet her gaze. What I wanted was a wife who didn't lie to me, but I'll settle for this. As I stepped out into the hallway, Jeff clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did it, Mark. Now you can move forward. I nodded, though a simmering part of me remained restless. Justice had been served in the courtroom, but I wasn't done. Ryan was still out there, untouched and smirking in my mind. The courtroom victory had felt like crossing the finish line of a marathon, but there was still unfinished business weighing on me. Lauren had been dealt with, the marriage dismantled, and the assets divided. But Ryan? He had skated through all of this, and scathed and smirking. That wouldn't last. It was time to put my plan into action. The first step was surgical precision. I began targeting Ryan's clients, the wealthy men and women who paid him ridiculous amounts of money for personal training sessions and exclusive fitness plans. These were people who valued their image as much as their health, and a scandal involving their trainer would send them running. Using the information I had gathered, I drafted anonymous emails to a dozen of Ryan's high-profile clients. The messages were polite but damning, attaching proof of his fake certifications and detailing his history of overcharging and duping customers. I phrased each message carefully, pointing out that continuing to associate with someone like Ryan could damage their own reputations. The fallout was immediate. Within days, Ryan's social media accounts were flooded with complaints and cancellations. Clients began pulling out of their contracts, demanding refunds and publicly questioning his credibility. Next, I turned my attention to his financial vulnerabilities. Public records revealed enough to paint a clear picture. Unpaid loans, overdue bills, and a history of juggling credit card balances to keep up appearances. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. I compiled everything into a comprehensive report and submitted it anonymously to his creditors. Banks and credit agencies weren't known for their leniency, and within weeks, the consequences began to snowball. Ryan's car, his prized Mustang, was repossessed, a tow truck hauling it away in full view of his gym clients. The humiliation was just beginning. To ensure the message spread far and wide, I took to the one place where reputations were made and destroyed overnight: online reviews. Under various aliases, I posted detailed accounts of Ryan's misconduct on every platform I could find. Yelp, Google, fitness forums, you name it. Each post was a carefully crafted takedown, exposing his shady practices and warning others to steer clear of Ryan's peak performance. Soon, his business ratings plummeted. Prospective clients stopped walking through the door, and the regulars began vanishing one by one. The final blow came in the form of a media tip. Using the connections I had made while gathering dirt on Ryan, I reached out to a local journalist who specialized in uncovering scams and frauds. The reporter, intrigued by the story of a flashy trainer deceiving Austin's elite, dug deeper into Ryan's business practices. The resulting article hit the front page of the lifestyle section within days. Fitness fraud: the rise and fall of Ryan's peak performance. The piece was brutal, detailing everything from his forged credentials to the financial ruin he'd caused for several of his clients. Ryan's gym was finished. I didn't go to see the wreckage firsthand, but I heard enough through the grapevine. Ryan had been forced to shut down his business, default on his lease, and move out of his apartment. The last I heard, he was living with a friend on the outskirts of town, his once flashy lifestyle reduced to ashes. One evening, as I sat on my porch sipping a beer, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but I knew immediately who it was. Ryan, you happy now? I stared at the screen for a moment before typing a response. Me? Almost. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Ryan had reaped what he'd sown, and while it didn't undo the damage he'd caused, it was enough to know that his smirk was gone for good. Bye-bye.